each occupied with his own thoughts, Crusoe keeping close behind his master's horse. The two elder hunters evidently ruminated on the object of their mission and the prospects of success, for their countenances were grave and their eyes cast on the ground. Dick Varley, too, thought upon the red man, but his musings were deeply tinged with the bright hues of a first adventure. The mountains, the plains, the Indians, the bears, the buffaloes, and 1,000 other objects danced wildly before his mind's eye, and his blood careened through his veins and flushed his forehead as he thought of what he should see and do, and felt the elastic vigor of youth respond in sympathy to the light spring of his active little steed. He was a lover of nature, too, and his flashing eyes glanced observantly from side to side as they swept along, sometimes through glades of forest trees, sometimes through belts of more open ground and shrubbery, anon by the margin of a stream, or along the shores of a little lake, and often over short stretches of flowering prairie land, while the firm, elastic turf sent up a muffled sound from the tramp of their mettlesome chargers. It was a scene of wild, luxuriant beauty, that might almost, one could fancy, have drawn involuntary homage to its bountiful Creator from the lips even of an infidel. After a time, Joe Blunt reined up, and they proceeded at an easily ambling pace. Joe and his friend Henry were so used to these beautiful scenes that they had long ceased to be enthusiastically affected by them, though they never ceased to delight in them.
"I hope," said Joe, "that them sodgers'll go their way soon. I've no notion of them chaps when they're left at a place with nothin' to do but whittle sticks."
"Why, Joe," exclaimed Dick Varley in a tone of surprise, "I thought you were admirin' the beautiful face of nature all this time, and you're only thinkin' 'bout the sodgers. Now that's strange."
"Not so strange after all, lad," answered Joe. "When a man's used to a thing, he gets to admire and enjoy it without speaking much about it. But it is true, boy, that mankind gets in course of time to think o' the little blissin's he's used to."
"Oui, oui," murmured Henry emphatically. "Well, Joe Blunt, it may be so, but I'm thankful I'm not used to this sort of thing yet," exclaimed Varley. "Let's have another gallop, so ho, come along, Crusoe," shouted the youth as he shook his reins and flew over a long stretch of prairie on which at that moment they entered. Joe smiled as he followed his enthusiastic companion, but after a short run he pulled up.
"Hold on, youngster," he cried. "Ye must larn to do as ye're bid, lad. It's trouble enough to be among wild Injuns and wild buffaloes, as I hope soon to be, without having wild comrades to look after."
Dick laughed and reined in his panting horse. "I'll be as obedient as Crusoe," he said, "and no one can beat him."
"Besides," continued Joe, "the horses won't travel far if we begin running all the wind out of 'em."
"Wall, I think we must give him to the pack hoss for to lead, eh?"
"Not a bad notion, Henry. We'll make that the penalty of running off again. So look out, Master Dick."
"I'm down," replied Dick with a modest air, "obedient as a baby, and won't run off again till the next time. By the way, Joe, how many days' provisions did you bring?"
"2. That's enough to carry us to the Great Prairie, which is 3 weeks' distance from this. Our own good rifles must make up the difference, and keep us when we get there."
"And suppose we neither find deer nor buffalo," suggested Dick.
"I suppose we'll have to starve."
"Dat is comfortable to think upon," remarked Henry. "More comfortable to think of than to undergo," said Dick. "But I suppose there's little chance of that."
"Well, not much,"
replied Joe Blunt, patting his horse's neck.
"But, do you see, lad, you never can count for sartin on anything. The deer and the buffalo ought to be thick in them plains at this time, and when the buffalo are thick, they covers the plains till you can hardly see the end of 'em. But, you see, sometimes the rascally redskins takes it into their heads to burn the prairies, and sometimes you find the place that should have been black with buffalo, black as a coal with fire for miles and miles on end. At other times the redskins go hunting in 'ticular places and sweeps 'em clean of every hoof that don't get away. Sometimes, too, the animals seem to take a schooner at a place and keeps out of the way. But one way or another, men generally manage to scramble through."
"Look yonder, Joe!" exclaimed Dick, pointing to the summit of a distant ridge, where a small black object was seen moving against the sky. "That's a deer, ain't it?" Joe shaded his eyes with his hand and gazed earnestly at the object in question.
"You're right, boy, and by good luck we've got the wind of him. Cut and take your chance now. There's a long strip of wood as'll let you get close to him."
Before the sentence was well finished, Dick and Crusoe were off at full gallop. For 100 yards they coursed along the bottom of a hollow. Then, turning to the right, they entered the strip of wood, and in a few minutes gained the edge of it. Here Dick dismounted. "You can't help me here, Crusoe. Stay where you are, pup, and hold my horse." Crusoe seized the end of the line, which was fastened to the horse's nose, in his mouth, and lay down on a hillock of moss, submissively placing his chin on his forepaws, and watching his master as he stepped noiselessly through the wood. In a few minutes Dick emerged from among the trees, and, creeping from bush to bush, succeeded in getting to within 600 yards of the deer, which was a beautiful little antelope. Beyond the bush behind which he now crouched, all was bare open ground, without a shrub or hillock large enough to conceal the hunter. There was a slight undulation in the ground, however, which enabled him to advance about 50 yards further, by means of lying down quite flat, and working himself forward like a serpent. Further than this he could not move without being seen by the antelope, which browsed on the ridge before him in fancied security. The distance was too great even for a long shot, but Dick knew of a weak point in this little creature's nature which enabled him to accomplish his purpose, a weak point which it shares in common with animals of a higher order, namely, curiosity. The little antelope of the North American prairies is intensely curious about everything that it does not quite understand, and will not rest satisfied until it has endeavored to clear up the mystery. Availing himself of this propensity, Dick did what both Indians and hunters are accustomed to do on these occasions. He put a piece of rag on the end of his ramrod, and, keeping his person concealed and perfectly still, waved this miniature flag in the air. The antelope noticed it at once, and, pricking up its ears, began to advance, timidly and slowly, step by step, to see what the remarkable phenomenon it could be. In a few seconds the flag was lowered, a sharp crack followed, and the antelope fell dead upon the plain.
"Hi, boy, that's good supper, anyhow,"
cried Joe, as he galloped up and dismounted. "Goot! Dat is better nor dried meat," cried Henri. "Give him to me. I will put him on my hoss, which is stronger than yon. But where is your hoss?" "He'll be here in a minute," replied Dick, putting his fingers to his mouth, and giving forth a shrill whistle. The instant Crusoe heard the sound, he made a savage and apparently uncalled for dash at the horse's heels. This wild act, so contrary to the dog's gentle nature, was a mere piece of acting. He knew that the horse would not advance without getting a fright, so he gave him one in this way which sent him off at a gallop. Crusoe followed close at his heels, so as to bring the line alongside of the nag's body, and thereby prevent its getting entangled; but, despite its best efforts, the horse got on one side of a tree and he on the other, so he wisely let go his hold of the line, and waited till more open ground enabled him to catch it again. Then he hung heavily back, gradually checked the horse's speed, and finally trotted him up to his master's side.
"'Tis a clever cur, good sooth,"
exclaimed Joe Blunt in surprise. "Ah, Joe, you haven't seen much of Crusoe yet. He's as good a man as any day. I've done little else but train him for 2 years gone by, and he can do most anything but shoot. He can't handle the rifle nohow." "Ho! Then I think perhaps him could if he was try," said Henri, plunging on his horse with a laugh, and arranging the carcass of the antelope across the pommel of his saddle. Thus they hunted and galloped, and trotted and ambled on